if you know me, I am crazy with a laminator. And so a lot of times when you go on your listing appointments, and today's class is going to be over the residential listing agreement and all the changes and how to stay in compliance and all that. Well, a lot of times you go on your listing appointment and you have your listing agreement, and then you come back and you go and input it into the MLS and you're like, wait, how many bedrooms was it? Where was the fireplace? Is the floor tile? Is it ceramic? Is it gas fireplace? What type of windows it has? So this is a form that you can pull directly from the CRMLS. It's 12 pages, so it's a lot to print every single time. I actually made it into 6 pages, put them back to back, and I laminated it. And I take it with me to all my listing agreements with a dry erase marker. And I just go through, and as I'm doing the listing afterwards, I will go through and say, okay, room type, fireplace. And that way I can answer all the questions right here. So when I go back to input it into the MLS, I already have all the answers right here, opposed to me having to look up pictures I took, having to call the seller and asking them, okay, what type of pool was it? Was it tile pool? Was it ceramic pool? Was it vinyl lining? I already have all my answers right here. So if this is something that you guys are interested in, I can add it to the chat at the end. You can also pull it from CRMLS, but it is definitely a great reference guide.
All that stuff is optional though, right? When
Yes, absolutely.
in the MLS.
Yeah, you absolutely don't. Well, it depends. When you go into it, there's little asterisks that have a red star, and those are required fields. The other ones are not.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so everything in this purchase or everything all together in real estate almost always starts with an AD. You'll notice your BRBC, buyer broker representation agreement, has the AD. The listing agreement has the AD first. The purchase agreement has the AD first. The common denominator is they want you to sign the AD. The AD is not committing the client to work with you. It's just an agency relationship explaining what a buyer's agent is, what a seller's agent is. That way you can at least establish you have some type of rapport with them. Sometimes back before we had the BRBC, we would have procuring cause cases. And in those procuring cause cases, the first thing we would ask as a panelist is, did you have an AD signed with the client? So it does help in procuring cause cases. It does help in a bunch of other issues if you at least get the AD signed. There is this little check box up at the top that only needs to be initialed if you are doing a lease agreement and the lease is greater than 1 year. If it's a month-to-month, a 6-month lease, you don't need to have the AD signed. I tend to do it anyways, but it's not needed. Okay. Now going into your listing agreement, you have the date prepared. This date has no bearing. It does not matter at all whatsoever. It is only used for a reference guide. So if you're going to modify the listing agreement anyway, it's going to say per the listing agreement dated, and this is the date you're going to get. When you do disclosures to the RPA, all of it. When it asks you what is the date of the form, it's going to be the date right here, the date prepared date. So many times people will take listings and they will talk to the seller on the phone, or they'll be in person with the seller and they'll ask them who's on title, and they'll just go with what Realist says. You should take a copy or get a copy of the last grant deed prior to you ever taking a listing. Here's why. A lot of times people think their title is in a trust, and it's not. It's as an individual. A lot of times people don't understand that I took title as a married woman, sole and separate. And while yes, I'm the only one who has to sign the listing agreement, I'm the only one who has to sign disclosures. When it comes time to closing, my spouse has to sign that interspousal deed. And if my spouse isn't willing to sign that interspousal deed, I'm not able to close this. So you want to make sure that you not only get a copy of the grant deed to make sure you have the correct sellers on there, but you also want to see how they hold title to see if maybe you're going to need other documents prior to closing, such as an interspousal deed, because California is considered a community property state. Here you're going to have your real estate company. The rest of this is self-explanatory, the property address, the APN number of the city. You don't want to leave anything blank. You really want to put in as much information as you can, including city and county. Then we go here to the list period. So one of the things that I'm going to go back. So the list period cannot be any greater than 24 months. You could do it for 6 months, 3 months, whatever. If you decide you want to extend it later on, you can do so. You would do a modification of terms, but between your listing agreement and any and all extensions, it cannot be greater than 24 months. Once you get to 24 months, at that point, you would just do a whole new lease agreement. There is an exception to this. If the seller happens to be an LLC or a corporation, then obviously that doesn't apply. You cannot, I see this all the time, have nothing there and just say that we'll figure out the expiration date. If your client can show proof that they signed something with no end date, not only would you be in violation of Code of Ethic Article number 1, but you would be in violation of Code of Ethic Article number 11. Everything has to be clear and in writing. This is considered providing incompetent service because you can't have a TBD. You actually have to have an expiration date. Now, let me exit out of this. Let me change my screen. Bear with me. Sorry, guys, I go back and forth between a lot of screens on this class. Okay, so we're going to MLS rules. MLS Rule 7.8 is mandatory submission. Listing broker shall input into the MLS all properties located within 2 days of the effective listing agreement. Well, it doesn't really define here what is 2 days from the effective listing agreement. It goes down further and says the effective date of the listing agreement is the later of all necessary signatures of the sellers and obtaining or the beginning of the list date. So now we're going to go back again. So you have 2 options. You have this beginning date, or you have the date that the client signed. Let's just say that the property is dirty and it's not ready to show, and we're going to go ahead and have the start date of this Friday, the 28th, and I go ahead and send it to them and they happen to sign it today. What is the later of the 2 dates? Well, the 28th is. So I would have 2 days from the 28th to put it in the MLS. If for some reason my listing were to start today and they don't sign it for 3 days, 4 days, they're busy, maybe they sign it on the 28th, then the 28th would be the later of the 2 days. I have 2 days from there to put it in the MLS. Well, people are thinking, okay, now we have this MLSA form. Now, prior to December, we had a form called SELM, Seller Excludes Listing for Multiple Listing Services. That form is no longer there. All the wording for that is now included in this MLS form. And in the MLSA form, item 3D, it shows right here, the seller is instructing it to go into the MLS right away, or there's 2 options. We're going to exclude it from the MLS till, I don't know, say March 15th, or we're going to exclude it from the MLS for its entire transaction. Whatever you put right here, even though it's not going in the MLS, does not make it a non-effective listing agreement. In other words, the 2-day rule still applies. You still have to notify the MLS that you have a listing within 2 days of the effective date. And you're thinking, well, I'm excluding it from the MLS. How do I do that? Well, if most of you, I'm assuming, are with CRMLS, there is a button that is called register. You're going to click on the registered button and it's going to ask you just the basics. When the listing was taken, when the listing expires, the sales price, and that is it. It doesn't ask for a description, doesn't ask for pictures, and no one else can see it. So can some other random agent see that you have an off-market listing? No, absolutely not. Can I see it? No, absolutely not. The only one who can see that you have a registered listing is you, the MLS, and your broker. That is it. But if you do not register it, notifying them that you have an MLS or you have a listing within 2 days, it is a violation of clear cooperation policy and is a $2,500 fine, $2,500. Right here, and we'll get to this, we'll go over it a second time when we get to the MLSA, but right here on 3F, you'll see clear cooperation policy does not apply. We do not have the option of ever marking that. All of the Board of Realtors around here, all of the MLSs around here, they have all adapted clear cooperation policy, which means that it applies to all of us. There is maybe one Board of Realtors that is up in Fresno and another one that's really high up north that have not adapted clear cooperation policy, but everyone else has. So therefore, you have 2 days from the effective date, which means that the date this begins or the date that the seller signs it, okay? Well, what happens if one seller signs it and the other one doesn't sign it for a week? How do we handle that? Okay. So now we go back into the MLS rules and see what it says. The MLS rule says right here, let me go to the, sorry, you guys can't see my cursor moving. It's really small, but it does state in the event that there is multiple signatures that you would have to put it in the MLS from the date of the first seller's signature. And you would have to put in the MLS that it is contingent upon the second seller signing it. And then obviously, hopefully the second seller would sign it. Do you have a valid contract at that time? Because it doesn't have both signatures. No, you don't. But in order to comply with the MLS rules, you have to have it from the date of the first seller signature. Now, if the date is greater than 2 days apart, then you need to go ahead and input it in there without the seller's second signature or the second signature. Any questions on that? All right. So I'm going to go a little bit in depth on this and I'll cover it twice because I feel like every agent always breaks it. Clear cooperation policy. We have right here that you have 2 days from the effective date to put in the MLS. What happens if I market the property? What happens if I put a for sale sign in the front yard? I put it on Facebook, I put it in Trillia, whatever it may be. In that case, you have 1 day to put it in the MLS as active or pending. If you do not, you are violating clear cooperation policy, and that is a $2,500 fine. What happens if I'm excluding it from the MLS and I'm going to have an off-market listing? Then what can I do? Well, you can show it, but you can only show it to people who have an active AD within your office. So what does that mean? Well, my own clients, I could show it to. And if there's another agent at Nest that has a client that wants to see it, I can let them see it. But I can't have a Remax agent show it, and I can't have a Prudential agent show it, and I can't have a Keller Williams agent show it because it is an off-market property. And they shouldn't even know about it because it's an off-market property. And if they do find out about it and I do show it to them, it's a violation of clear cooperation policy and it is a $2,500 fine. Now to go a little bit deeper into this, on here, you could do a coming soon. If you do a coming soon, it is the opposite. I can market it to anyone I want, but I cannot show it to anyone, which means that the seller can't suddenly have people knocking on their door and say, sure, come on in. They cannot show it to anyone during coming soon status, which also includes, but not limited to, doing a garage sale, doing an estate sale. And you're thinking, well, that's not an open house. Doesn't matter. It's on the market as coming soon. People know that it's coming soon, and you're opening the doors to the public. Now, can the seller have a friend over for coffee? Yes, absolutely. That's just having a friend come over. But if you're opening the doors to the public who isn't a close friend of theirs and you let them in the door, is a violation of clear cooperation policy, and it is a $2,500 fine. We will also go over that again and again and again when I get to the MLSA. The list price right here is the list price. You can do range pricing. I do not agree with it. MLS rule states that if you're going to do range pricing, the difference between the low price and the end price cannot be greater than 85% away from each other. Stay away from range pricing. You're pretty much already telling the client, if you put that it's 750 to 800, you're already telling them to write the offer at 750. Your seller is willing to take 750. So I would try to avoid range pricing altogether and just do an actual sales price. We used to have a listing agreement for mobile homes and for probates. That is no longer the case. We do one listing agreement, and if it is mobile home or probate, they would go ahead and mark those two boxes there. The first part right here, item C, it makes it very, very clear that commission is negotiable and it is not fixed by law. The same thing I say when you fill out the BRBC is the same thing I'm going to state here. If you are having a conversation with your client and you are talking about commission and you have told them that this is your commission, great. You can go to your appointment with it saying 2.5 or 3% or whatever it may be. But if you have yet to have a single conversation with your client on commission, when you go to that listing appointment, this 100% needs to be blank. If it is not blank, what you are telling them is commission is not negotiable and it is fixed, because you are already telling them that the only thing that you're going to take is 2.5. Now that may be true, and 2.5 may be the lowest you are willing to go, but you at least need to make it seem like it is negotiable. And when you guys can't agree to a term, then you can either walk or whatever. But if you go into a listing agreement with this filled out prior to you having a discussion about it, you are violating the DOJ lawsuit and could get in deep trouble. So you want to make sure you have a conversation about commission before you put anything in here. If you put commission at 2.5, and maybe you have a TC fee, maybe you are staging the property, how would you handle that? You would put it right here. I'm not saying $500 is your typical TC fee, but if $500 is your TC fee, then you would handle it like this. They would pay you 2.5 plus 500. Obviously, you would pay the TC and you would get reimbursed by the 500 here. If you were doing something like pictures or staging the property and that was going to cost more, maybe that's going to cost $2,000, then you would put in the other terms that you are promising that out of your commission, you're going to stage the property and you're going to take pictures. And then right here, it shows their commission as 2.5 plus 2,000. So then that way you can get reimbursed. This is my own personal opinion. Take it with a grain of salt. People think real estate agents make too much money to begin with. I think, frankly, we work really, really hard for our money, and I think we deserve every penny of it. But if you're going to nickel and dime the client by charging TC's fees and all these fees, you may have a harder time selling the agreement. I usually find agents have a better time at getting their clients to sign things if they're like, yes, I have a TC, but I pay for that out of my 2.5%. Yes, I have pictures and it costs me about $400, but I pay for that out of my 2.5%. The second column is for a non-represented buyer. It's a buyer that has zero representation. It is not to be confused with dual agency. This is a buyer that thinks they're too good for their own self and they don't want an agent and they want to represent themselves. Why CAR put this little thing here, I have no idea. Their mindset when they were doing the standard forms is, well, a listing agent has to do a little bit more work if the buyer is not represented. To me, I don't think that's true. You still have to take the papers and send it off to the client, whether you're sending it off to the buyer, whether you're sending it off to the buyer's agent, you still have to do the same amount of work. But CAR has put in here that if you feel like it's going to be harder for you, you can ask for a commission here. Now here's the offset of it. If your seller is willing to pay you compensation for a non-represented buyer, they better be willing to pay that same amount of compensation to a represented buyer. And here's where we're going to get in trouble with procuring cause. You have a buyer. They wrote an offer at 2%. They're asking for 2% commission. The seller comes back and says, nope, I'm not paying any commission. And then the buyer's agent says, well, sorry, I don't work for free. I'm out. This buyer decides to come in unrepresented. And now you're all excited because you're making 1.5% for a non-represented buyer. If that other agent finds out that you're making 1.5% when you weren't willing to pay that 1.5% to her, it could easily look as procuring cause. It could also look like you violated agency relationship, that you purposely convinced your seller to not accept any commission so you could get paid more. It is a huge, messy mess. So you want to stay away from this. Now, my own personal preference, I think this should be left zero. I really don't think you should make anything on a non-represented buyer. And I really don't think our sellers should even deal with non-represented buyers. How do you handle that? Here's my conversation with the seller. Hey, seller, you have the ability to take any offer you want, whether the client's represented or not represented. But here's a little thing that I kind of think could happen. The seller or the buyer, when they write their offer and I give them the disclosures, they're going to ask me, what does this mean on the disclosures? And I'm going to say, oh, sorry, my hands are tied. I'm not your agent. You need to seek legal advice. And if they don't seek legal advice, that's up to them. Later on, they ask me more questions. My answer is the same. Sorry, I can't answer that. I'm not your agent. When this transaction closes and they feel like they didn't understand everything properly, who are they going to sue? Well, not their agent, because they don't have one. So the first one they're going to come after is you, the seller. So you might want to think twice about taking a non-represented buyer, because it does leave you open for the possibility of getting sued. Doesn't mean you can not get sued with an agent or a buyer who is being represented, but the chances of you getting sued are so much greater with a non-represented buyer. Now, take that out of the situation. How do you as an agent handle it? Well, are you allowed to give them the copy of the purchase agreement? Yes, you absolutely are. But I'm not representing them. So am I still allowed to give them a copy of it? Yes, you absolutely are. However, the purchase agreement that you give them has to be completely blank. You can put in the property address and you can put in the seller's name. That is it. You cannot put the sales price. You cannot put contingencies. You cannot put deposit. Well, Kelly, what if they send me an email that says, here's what I want for the deposit. Here's what I want for the price. Does not matter. You cannot fill that in. You could give it to them absolutely blank. By filling it in, you are acting as if you are their agent when you clearly are not, and you are violating agency relationship. Well, Kelly, I feel really uncomfortable. I really don't want to give them the purchase contract. Do I have to? No, you absolutely do not. They can write an offer on a blank piece of paper. Personally, what I would do is I would have conversations with the seller. Hey, seller, I think it's too much of a liability to have someone not represented. So I think that we should possibly offer them commission. Maybe something small, maybe 1.5, maybe 2.5. It really is up to you. But that way I could go back and tell this buyer, hey, buyer, the seller really does not like you being not represented. They have no problem paying for your agent. So they're willing to give you 2%, either to have someone else represent you, or I will be more than happy to represent you at 2%. But the seller really wants you to have representation. Can you please try to find representation? If they still don't want to, that is their choice. It is up to the seller whether or not they want to accept a non-represented buyer. On here, where it says this does not apply to dual agency, a lot of people got confused, because back in the day, we used to have a listing at 6%, and then we'd offer 3% out to the other side, keep 3% to us. But if you were the dual agent, you would put in there, and in the MLS, it used to be called a variable rate. That is where you say, well, if I'm the dual agent, I'm going to take less money. Well, how do we do that now? Well, you do with it completely on the buyer's side. This listing agreement is just for you as a listing agreement. So in that case, you would do your BRBC at 3%, all houses in Riverside County. And then when they found out that they liked your house at 12345 Maple Street, you would do a modification of terms just for that one house, 12345 Maple Street at 2%. And when you present it to your client, you say, look, I normally would have charged them 3%, but because I'm going to be the agent on both sides, I'm going to go ahead and drop it to 2%. They're only asking you for 2%. That is how you handle dual agency. I have been asked every question known to man. Can we go ahead and put 5 right here and then I'll reduce it later so then the buyer or the seller can get comfortable with paying the buyer's agent's commission? No, you can't. That's misleading. It's not truthful. You need to only put here what you're charging as listing agent. Well, can I put right here what we're going to pay out the buyer's agent? That way they can at least get used to this is what we'd pay the buyer's agent. And then when the buyer comes represented, we don't have to worry about this. No, that's misleading. You need to keep it to this is just the listing agent spot. And if you do want to put something here, even though I highly recommend against it, then you can. You deal with the buyer having to pay the buyer's agent's commission when they write their offer. Any questions on this? Any questions on how to handle a non-represented buyer? Anything? So I know this is a small class today, and I hate to pick on people. However, please, I promise you whatever you're thinking in your head is a question that someone else is thinking, and I already know every line of this contract by heart. So if you have any questions at all about non-represented buyer, how to handle commission, how to handle dual agency, now's the time to ask. All right. The next one is C3, continuous rights. Continuous rights means that after this listing has expired, and we took the expiration date out, so let's put a new one in. Let's do March 31st. After this expires, any buyers that came into the property within the next 90 days, they would owe me a full commission, this full 2.5. But it cannot just be any buyers. It has to be a list of buyers that I named, which means that I have to provide them a list that is called notice of property involvement, or I have to send them a text message or an email listing all the buyers that came in the house. Well, Kelly, I have the list of the OHNA, the open house advisory, all the buyers that came in there, but most of my houses were shown by other agents. No problem. If you're going to do something like 90 days here and someone picks up the phone and calls you and says they want to see it Saturday at 3, you need to reply back with, sure, no problem. However, I need to keep a record of every buyer that's come in the house. Can you please tell me the name of your buyer? John Doe. Great. I'm going to go ahead and write that on my list. Then the next time someone calls, can I get the name of your buyer? Can an agent lie and give you a fake name? Yeah, absolutely. But you want to do the best you can with providing the name. Now, I'm going to skip ahead. Right here, it shows a definition of this is in 4D2. So let's skip ahead to 4D2. And 4D2, right here, continuous rights. It is who physically entered and was shown the property during the list period or any extension by a broker or any other broker. But this is a buyer that was shown the property. So I can't say Sam at Remax, any client that he brings, they owe me compensation. No, because that wasn't the buyer who was physically entered the property. I can't list the agents that showed the property. I have to list the buyers. And you're thinking, well, I didn't show it to them. Doesn't matter. The house would have never had a lockbox on the property. The buyer would have never known about the house if it wasn't in the MLS, and it's in the MLS because of the job you did. So any buyers whatsoever, whether another agent brought them into the property or not, that came in the house during the time you had the listing, if they turn around and buy it after the listing has expired, they would owe you a full commission. You need to make sure, and it says right here, that you need to provide them the list. broker to deliver to the seller a written notice of such names of the property on the notice of property involvement. So you would need to provide this form to them. Doesn't have to be this form, but you could put in a text message or an email providing all the names of the buyers that came in. So many times I will see a listing agreement that looks like this, and they don't give them a list of names. The other thing you're thinking of, well, what if it cancels? Then what do I do? What if this is blank and it cancels? Well, let's skip ahead to the cancellation of contract. Once a client signs this, they are in a legal binding contract. You do not have to let them get out of this. The cancellation is a mutually agreed document. If they don't, here it is. If you don't want to let them out of the cancellation, you absolutely do not have to. However, it says right here that they will owe you a commission if, and then you can have two things. A, any time that it was going to expire. So let's just say it was a 6-month listing and it went until July. If they go and sell, convey, or transfer anytime between now and July, then they would owe me a full commission. Even if the previous listing agreement, I didn't have that continuous time period, but I want to have it right here, I absolutely can. And what if they say, well, it wasn't on the first listing agreement? No, it wasn't. However, I don't have to agree to a cancellation. You signed a legal binding contract. So if you want me to cancel it, it has to be on mutually agreed upon terms. And my terms, in order to let me cancel it, is I'm going to put a time of continuance here. Now, you wouldn't need to send them a list of those buyers because you're going to have to type in the buyers' names right here. So if a client calls you and they want to cancel it, you can go ahead and give them this and put 90-day continuous time period, and then go ahead and list the buyers here if you so choose to do so. There is no rules and regulations on the continuous time period. It can be 2 weeks. It can be 90 days. It can be 360 days. Whatever it is, it has to be terms that are mutually agreed upon. So some people ask, well, can I do something like 180 days? Sure, if they agree to it, but it has to be mutually agreed upon days. Now, what happens if I take a listing after someone else already had a listing? Well, right here, it states that I'm letting them know that if they already had a listing, this is who was previously listed with. And the first thing I'm going to ask is, can I see a copy of that listing agreement? And did they have continuous days on it? They did. Okay, I want to see the buyers that they listed right here. Okay, so now I know that those buyers, if they come in here, that the client may possibly owe two people's commission. They may owe me and they may owe the other agent's commission. Well, what if I just don't ask them and I leave this blank? Well, then you're not looking out for your client's best interest. You're not informing them that they could end up possibly owing two separate agents commission. Code of Ethic Article 9, I believe, says everything needs to be clear in writing. 1, you have to look out for their fiduciary duty. If you are taking a listing after someone else's, if they've canceled it, you want to see a copy of that cancellation and you want to list all the buyers right here. If you are taking it after someone else and it hasn't canceled, then you want to still get a copy of the listing and you want to ask them, have they provided you a list of all the buyers' names? So you can name it right here. Failure to ask for this is violating Code of Ethic article. Any questions on continuous rights? All right. Items included and excluded. All of item number D is a reference guide. I really wish that people would take a copy of item number 9 of the RPA and take it with them to the listing agreement so they can show agents what is technically included or excluded. So let's just say you have a conversation with the seller and they say that they want to keep the chandelier in the back right bedroom, and you type it right here. And you put in the MLS that they're keeping the chandelier in the back right bedroom. And then you get an offer and it's $20,000 above asking and you're super excited and you go ahead and accept it. But the offer never addressed anything about the chandelier in the back right bedroom. And then when it's time to close, the seller goes and takes the chandelier in the back right bedroom. Guess what? they're in breach of contract. They need to return that chandelier. And the seller is going to get mad and say, well, I told you, I saw that you put in the MLS. We agreed to it in the listing agreement. And you're going to say, oh, I'm sorry, I did not do my job. I should have carried it over to the purchase contract. So guess who probably ends up paying for that chandelier in the back right bedroom? You as the agent. So you want to make sure that everything you put right here, whether it's included or excluded, gets carried into the purchase contract. What if you see something that is above ground swing set or a above ground jacuzzi and it's excluded and you don't think to put it in here, which doesn't help you to remember to put it in the RPA. And all of a sudden this closes and the buyer sends you a 3-day notice to remove said items and the seller doesn't want to remove the items. Then what? Well, the buyer can remove it and take them to court for the cost of what it costs to remove those items. And then they're going to go to you as an agent and say you didn't explain that to them. I know we are going over the listing agreement and not the purchase agreement, but I just want to spend a little bit of time. So I know item number 9 of the RPA by heart. And we're all here because we got a real estate license. And the one thing in real estate you learned is if it was tangible, if you could pick it up and touch it, it is real property. And if it is fixed to something, it stays. So in other words, if you have a sub-zero refrigerator that's hooked into the wall, that's real property, it stays. If I can unplug it and pull it out, it's personal property, it leaves. But that's not the case. Unfortunately, if you really read item number 9, which is probably 3/4 of the page, it will say certain things like window coverings, all window coverings, any curtain shears. So these curtains that are right here behind me, I can take it off of the curtain rod at any given time. Doesn't matter. It's considered real property and stays with the property. Okay. Potted plants. Great. They're in a pot. I can pick them up and move them. That's personal property. If it's a plant put into the ground, that stays. Common sense. I get that one. Okay. What about a little water fountain? It's just a tiny fountain. It's not attached to anything. It's plugged into the wall. That's considered real property. Any water features, water softeners, water fountains, that stays with the property. The other one that is a big misconception is smart features. So you have your thermostat that may be a Nest thermostat, and that is supposed to say, but if it is hooked to any type of security system, meaning a Ring doorbell, meaning cameras for security purposes, whether it is hardwired or not, that is considered personal property. And you're thinking, well, none of this makes sense. A water fountain I can pick up and I get to take, or I can't take, but a hardwired security system gets to stay. Yeah, unfortunately, that's the case. Fireplace screens around a fire, I can pick it up and remove it, but it is supposed to stay. So for those agents who say, well, I deal with listings all the time, I'm primarily a listing agreement agent, you really need to look at the RPA and you need to look at item number 9. So when you go on that listing agreement, you can honestly tell your client what you can remove and what you cannot remove. The other big one is TV brackets. Okay. So it has gone back and forth over the years, but now it states that any brackets securing any TVs or sound systems or anything like that is to be removed, and the holes are to be patched and repaired, but do not have to be painted. Well, what about all the nails on the holes from when I take the pictures off? Do I need to repair those? No, absolutely don't. So although we're focusing on the listing agreement today, you really need to also understand the parts of the purchase contract to be able to explain to your client whether something's included or not included, or whether you need to fix the hole or not. Any questions on that? Okay. Lease items. If you do know that it is solar, try to get ahead of the game as soon as possible. Per the purchase contract, it is the seller's responsibility to provide the information of the solar company, but the transfer responsibility is the buyer. And at the end of the day, yes, you could cancel the buyer because they couldn't figure out whether or not they can make the transfer approved in enough time. But you really don't want to have to get 15 days in escrow to restart all over. So if you could get ahead of the game, talk to the solar company, find out if certain things are transferable, all of that stuff. It just makes you one step above everyone else. Item E1, what is the MLS that you are putting it in? Most of you are putting it in CRMLS. There are different areas that have their own MLS. I know Big Bear Lake Arrowhead does. If you are putting it in an additional MLS or a completely different MLS, and this is where you would put it. Okay, E2 is a little bit confusing. So unfortunately, all of them are C words. We have closing costs, concessions, commission, compensation. So it does get confusing. The one thing that we cannot say in the MLS at all whatsoever is compensation and commission. Concessions is a fancy word for closing costs. So here is where the seller is saying, I authorize you to state, yes, I'm willing to pay for part of their closing costs, which is concessions. Based off of your MLS, CRMLS is the one that I think everyone uses. There is just a yes and no box, and it's going to say seller authorizes you to state that whether or not they're willing to pay for closing costs, yes or no. If they are, and you do mark that box, yes, they're willing to pay for closing costs, then you need to make sure that they mark this box right here. If you want to advertise it on other documents, like sellers willing to give a $20,000 credit, whatever it may be, and it's something outside the MLS, and they need to mark this box. It does state right here that by them marking this box is not them giving you permission to state a dollar amount. If they want to state a dollar amount, you would come down here to item number K, additional terms, and you would put per E3 or E2, seller authorizes you to state that they're willing to pay up to $10,000. However, I prefer to stay away from any dollar amount, because if you make a statement like $10,000 and then you get a really, really low ball offer, are they really going to want to still pay that $10,000? Probably not. So I'd probably stay away from it. And then depending on if they want to offer credit for closing costs, you can mark this and then mark it in the MLS as well. In here and in the MLS, it makes it very clear that we can kindly tell the other side, I do not want you to take pictures of the house, but it's out of our control. Sometimes people don't listen to us when we tell them, please don't take pictures of our listing. In here is a spot where this is where the seller says, I'm only allowing you to put the pictures in the MLS. I don't want you to take the pictures and put it on a postcard, Facebook, Instagram, whatever it may be. If they do happen to choose to mark this box, your pictures can only go in the MLS and they cannot go in any additional marketing. This one, timing of presentation of offer. One of the things that I really like to point out is in the listing agreement and in the MLS rules, you are to present any and all offers until the day it closes. Well, yeah, but we're already in escrow. It doesn't matter. MLS rules and the listing agreement says you have to present any and all offers until the day it closes escrow, unless you have written instructions on the contrary. So if I list this at $1 million and I get an offer at 500 and it's horribly written, do I have to present it? Yes, 100%. If I do not present it, I'm in breach of contract, violation of code of ethic articles, and violation of MLS rules. Well, how do I avoid that? I have a conversation with my seller ahead of time. We're listing this at $1 million. I know you're probably not going to look at anything under 950. So do you want me to present you any offers under 950? No, please don't present me any offers under 950. Great. It's customary that everyone writes an offer with their proof of funds and bank statements and pre-approval letter. If it's not a complete offer and doesn't have those things, do you want me to present it to you? No, don't present it to me. Great. When you get an offer, you can reply back per the seller's instructions. They don't want me to present them any offers that don't have adequate proof of funds. Per the seller's instructions, they don't want me to present them any offers under 950. Otherwise, you are required to present any and all offers. When you get into escrow, you need to have that conversation with them. Now that we're in escrow, if we get some backup offers, do you want me to present it to them? No, I think I'm okay. Okay, great. You get a backup offer per the seller's instructions. Now that we are in escrow, they no longer want me to present them any offers. You need to be able to say per the seller. So many times we have been in code of ethic hearings and the listing agent will say, we're in escrow. So I didn't give them a copy of that offer because we're in escrow. Yeah, but did the seller tell you not to present it? No, but we're in escrow and so they already had an accepted offer. Guess what? That agent was guilty of Code of Ethic Article 1, 3, 11, and multiple MLS violations. If you pay an MLS violation, it hurts your pocketbook. But if you pay a Code of Ethic violation and they fine you, you have to post your picture on CAR's naughty list for 3 years, which means that there's going to be a picture of you on CAR's website for other agents to look at to see what you did wrong. So you want to make sure that you're presenting all offers unless you have written instruction on the contrary. Here are the 2 things that CAR found are the most common things where clients say, no, don't present me any offers. The first one is, maybe I listed it on a Wednesday, but they don't want to see any offers until after we do the open house over the weekend. So in that case, I'm going to say right here, per the seller's instructions, they don't want me to present any offers until after the next weekend, which would be March 3rd. And I'd put it on there, or 5 days or whatever it may be. The other one is a buyer's love letter. This defaults to, per the seller's instructions, they don't want any buyer's love letters. Why is that? Because it becomes a fair housing issue. At the end of the day, if you have 10 offers on the property, all I see is that you have 9 very angry buyers that want a reason as to why you didn't accept the offer. By accepting love letters, you're opening them up to a fair housing issue. The same story I always say, there is a single man who wrote an offer on a house. He happened to talk to his friend who's a neighbor, and the neighbor said, oh no, sorry, they didn't go with you. They ended up going with this couple, and it's this awesome couple that has kids around the same age as me. And how would the seller know? Well, the buyer said, oh, we picked a family that was right, perfect. Their kids are the same age as for you. I'm so excited, all this stuff. And he went and told his single friend who didn't get the house. Well, now that guy sued because he felt like he was discriminated against. The buyer only picked them because they were a family and not a single man. And you're thinking the chance of that happening slim to none, possibly, but there has been lawsuits based off of that. So if you're the listing agent and you get an offer with the buyer's love letter, it already defaults to right here that the seller say, no, I don't want it. So you're going to respond back with, per the seller's instructions, please send me a new offer without the love letter, or I will go ahead and remove the love letter from the offer because the seller does not want to see it. Now, it's buyer's agent. Does that mean you have to stop writing them? Of course not. The listing agent on the other side is not taking my classes or don't understand the contract, then that's on them. You as a buyer's agent, it doesn't get you in trouble for you writing an offer. If the listing agent doesn't realize what her client said and still submits it anyways, that's on her. If you are the listing agent and you have a seller who's like, no, I really want those love letters, then by all means, you have to honor what they say. You would mark this box. It does end with the seller is acting against the advice of a broker, because again, we think it is bad for a seller to accept a buyer's love letter due to fair housing issues. Investigation. This used to be completely blank here, and none of these boxes would be marked. However, the NHD report is a statutory disclosure. So for that, they have now incorporated it in here to where you cannot uncheck this box. It states that the seller shall order this report within 5 days of this agreement. NHD reports do not cost the client anything until it closes escrow, but they want you to go ahead and get it ordered right away because you're going to need it. It's a statutory disclosure. My opinion on all these other ones, to be honest with you, unless it is HOA documents, I would not order anything else. I don't want to know what is on that termite report. If there's a lot of termite What happens if the buyer wasn't planning on asking for termite at all? Now I just open the door because I have to give them a copy of that termite report. I see so many sellers that want to do a home inspection on the property. They want to know what's wrong with it before they sell it. Why? Let the buyer do their own home inspection. By you getting a copy of that home inspection, you now have to give a copy to it of all future buyers. Any buyers that come along, you have to give a copy of it. I would prefer not to. I would rather not know. If the buyer wants a certain report, wait and let them get it. Unless it's HOA documents, because that is a statutory requirement, I would probably want to go ahead and get that ordered as soon as possible. Exceptions to ownership of title. A lot of people leave this blank because they don't understand it. The one biggest exception that I think you're going to have is if someone is on title as a married person, sole and separate. California is a community property state. So even though that person bought it by themselves as a married person, sole and separate, they now have to have an interspousal deed. If someone bought it as a single man and you now know that they are married, that spouse has to sign an interspousal deed. If that spouse is unwilling to, then it's going to have to go to court and they're going to have to force their spouse to sign that. And if they can't do that, then unfortunately you don't have a listing. So if there is a little hiccup on title because you need an interspousal deed signed, you want to make sure that it's very clear right here. And then when you get your offer, you also want to put that it's subject to spouse signing an interspousal deed. Item number H is the SPRP, seller finding a replacement property. It's a really important document that a lot of people forget to add. But just because you check it here does not make it so. It has to carry over to the RPA. So they may fill it out, which is nice, but if the buyer doesn't agree to it being contingent on them finding a replacement property, they can't throw it in halfway in the transaction. So you need to, if you're taking notes with a pen, make sure you note just the same as D up above, H needs to be carried over to the RPA. So many times I will get that call, Kelly, the seller does not want to sell their house anymore. Why? Well, they couldn't find anything. Did they do the SPRP? Nope. Well, sorry, they're in a legal binding contract. The purchase contract has no pre-typed seller's contingencies. None. If you want a seller's contingency, meaning they have a way to back out based off of them not finding a replacement property, then you have to add it in when you get the counter. This is contingent upon the SPRPC attached. The last one is
Putting it in the counter offer as well covers that base too, right?
Absolutely. So if you put in the MLS and then when they write an offer, they don't put it in their offer, then yes, you would put it in the counter.
Cool.
Seller opting out of lockbox and sign. Honestly, I like to leave this blank, even if they don't want to sign in their front yard. Once I put this here, then no matter what, if they change their mind in 3 days, I can't suddenly put a sign back up. I would have to do a modification of terms, saying that it's okay for a sign. I usually like to leave both these blank, and then we verbally discuss whether or not we're going to do a lockbox or we're going to do a sign. If you have any additional terms that you wanted to add, here is a place to do so. So before we move forward to the rest of it, any questions on this? Okay, so I'm going to try to get through the MLSA and the cancellation contract and the modification of terms all in this one class. So I'm going to go kind of fast over the next few parts. If there's any part you want me to slow down on, by all means, let me know and we can go slow on it. The advisory, the BCA, which is the broker compensation advisory, is already attached. But if for some reason this listing is a short sale or a trust or a probate or an REO or something like that, you would go ahead and attach these advisories. These advisories still have to carry over to the purchase contract. So if it is a trust, you need to let them know it's a trust. If it's an REO, you need to let them know it's an REO. Compensation schedule. The best part about this is the item 4B. Seller agrees to pay broker compensation for services under this agreement. And then it says seller agrees to pay the broker an additional amount. So if you find them a willing and able buyer at any time during this transaction or any extension thereof, they owe you compensation. So a lot of times when they want to cancel it or they want to fight and say they don't owe you compensation, we go back to this compensation to broker item paragraph 4, and we break down all the different ways of why they owe you compensation. Item number D3, seller's interference with listing. Without broker's prior written consent, the property is withdrawn from sale, it's conveyed, leased, rented, or otherwise transferred, or made unmarketable, which means that the seller cannot just list it with you and then decide that they don't want to show it to anyone. Now, if when they first took the listing agreement, they said it was a drive-by only because there was tenants in there and you mutually agreed to it, that is fine. But in other words, they have to make the property marketable. It clearly shows right here that they will owe you full compensation if, and it gives you all these options. And guess what? The option is they made it unmarketable. So you could turn around and threaten to sue them and even possibly sue them for your full commission because they made the property unmarketable during the listing. This one doesn't always come up as much, but if the buyer removed all of their contingencies and then they canceled and the seller was entitled to the deposit, right here it states that they are receiving damages for a breach of contract. Therefore, you would be entitled to 50% of that deposit. Obviously, no more than what your commission is, but if the total deposit is $20,000, you would, and it says right here, equal or lesser to 1/2 of the damages recovered. So if they recovered a $50,000 deposit, you would be entitled to 25,000 of it. If your commission is less than 25, then obviously you don't get that 25,000, but you would be entitled to 50% of the deposit. A lot of times people let this go and they don't go after the seller for it, but according to the contract, if they receive the buyer's deposit for damages, liquidated damages, then they would owe you 50% of it. Seller's obligation to other broker. This is if we made it very clear that it was already previously listed and they named certain buyers on there. Maximum list period, we already talked about that. Items included and excluded. It also says right here, the same thing I said, broker is not responsible and does not guarantee that any of the above exclusions or exclusions will be in the purchase price. So you can fight back and forth about the chandelier in the back right bedroom. Just by them putting it in here doesn't mean that they get to keep it. It just means that we're going to try to carry it over. But let me tell you, if you argue it back and forth and they don't get their way, okay, fine. But if it doesn't get into the purchase contract because you forgot to put it in there, it's going to look really bad on you. And it's going to look really bad on you and you're going to really tarnish your reputation. This is a big one. And a lot of people go past this. Seller represents that they are unaware of any of the following: notice of defaults, bankruptcies, insolvencies, all this. I want to focus on the second one. Any delinquent amount due under the loan. So many times you as a buyer's agent are halfway in the transaction and then all of a sudden you find out that there's a notice of default filed and now they're upside down. Now it's a short sale and you want to threaten all the stuff and you're saying, well, you should have told me this. And they're saying, well, I didn't know a notice of default was filed. Well, California state law says you have to be 3 months delinquent for a notice of default to be filed. 3 months from that, file a notice of trustee sale. 21 days from that they take it to sell. So in this contract, either the seller is lying to you and not letting you know that they're delinquent, or they let you know that they are delinquent and you as an agent didn't notify the buyer of the possibility of a notice of default coming up. So you want to make sure that you remind the client if there's any delinquency of any amount, they need to make you aware of it so you can make the other party aware of it. Broker's responsibilities. and authorities and limits. Obviously, we have to abide by all of MLS rules, internet rules, media control. We can't violate, I can think of it, copyright infringement laws. We need to abide by all that. Presenting offers, just like I stated before, it needs to be presented up until the day of closing unless they give you written instructions on the contrary. Seller has to act in good faith. Us as agents need to order any reports. We can either do so beforehand based off of what they marked in 2F3, or we can order it when we get an offer and they're requesting it too. Deposit doesn't necessarily come in hand anymore. Long time ago, I don't know, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, the buyers would write a check to any escrow company. You would hold it, you would put it into your trust log, and we would hold on to it. That is no longer the case. Agents don't really hold on to the buyer's deposit check. The buyer just sends their earnest money deposit in a wire directly to the escrow company. They still have this sentence here because some people may want to do that, but more than likely you will never handle a check. If you do get given a check from the buyer or the seller at any given time, you need to make sure that you tell your broker and you input it into what is called a trust log. Failure to do it is abiding by trust rules and regulations. It's a code of ethic article, I want to say 10, and it could be a possible loss of license. So you can't take any money from your client without registering it into the trust log. This talks about agency relationship and the possibility of dual agency. Okay, so I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this. Tri-counties, Downey, PWR, I've taught quite a few classes on dual agency, and it is kind of tricky. So dual agency is when you represent both the buyer and seller. But when I talk about you, I mean your brokerage. This contract is not by you as an individual. Nest is the one who's holding the listing agreement. So if there was another agent within that office that held the buyer, it would be considered dual agency. The same rules apply. I'm going to pick on people because we have people here. If Seth had the listing and Stephen had the buyer, it would be considered dual agency. Okay, here's some of the rules with dual agency. 1, things that you wouldn't have normally have disclosed, now you have to. The appraisal came in $10,000 higher. I normally would not let the seller know because an appraisal is considered an opinion. That's not a report, and we are not required to give it to the other side. However, as a dual agent, you are required to give it to the other side. You not only have to disclose that there's a dual agency, but you have to disclose any bias that might have occurred. So in other words, if I have listed the seller's house before, or I've worked with their cousin before, or I have my husband's or coworker, I would need to explain that bias to the buyer, because the buyer is going to say, well, you treated them more fairly. Your husband works with them, or it is your cousin's best friend. Same thing with the buyer. If I was working, I just met the seller, I just took the listing, but I've been working with this buyer for 1.5 years. I would need to disclose that I have a relationship, or only a working relationship with this buyer for the last 1.5 years. If there is any way that either one of the side can say, well, that's not fair, you know them better, you know them through this, you need to disclose. No one has ever got sued for disclosing too much. Now, as an agent, you're obviously supposed to disclose if you are representing an immediate family member, brother, sister, grandparent, parent, all that stuff, husband, stuff like that. That's to outside agents. But if it is an inside agent, meaning a dual transaction, you need to go a step further. You need to explain the type of relationship you have, whether it's just working, whether I sold them multiple houses, you need to disclose it. You can disclose it in the listing agreement. You would disclose in the purchase agreement. You can disclose it in an addendum, but both parties need to be aware of any uncreated bias. Second part of this is you have to be really careful to where you are only a messenger and no longer the advocate. Because if they go and do a physical inspection and they ask me, well, what should I ask for in repairs? And I tell them $10,000. Oh, this looks like a lot of work. You should ask for $10,000. Now I'm working against my seller. Well, wait a minute. That's not my seller. It's Seth's seller. So do I really care? Yes, because that seller is with Nest. And by the umbrella above me, it is still considered my seller. So therefore, I have to say, here's all the stuff that we found on the house. Now you tell me what you want to write as for a dollar amount for your request for repairs. Here's all the comparables. What do you want to write as an offer? It makes it a lot harder. And a lot of times you'll get 5 or 6 offers and you think, well, I want to go with someone within my company because I know them and I can handle them better. In a lot of cases, that is correct. But in a lot of cases, it's incorrect because now it's a dual agency. So you cannot advocate for your client anymore. You have to be a messenger. The number one lawsuit out there is due to dual agency. The second one is lack of disclosure, but most people will sue a company based on dual agency and they felt like they weren't properly represented. So you want to make sure that if you were handling something, either you worked both sides or someone else in your office worked the other side, that you just disclose. Any questions on that? Talked about unrepresented buyers, termination of agency relationship. It doesn't automatically terminate. If they wanted to terminate it, then it has to be mutually agreed upon. We talked about sellers' concessions. Now, if your seller is saying, I want to give a $10,000 for sellers' concessions, it can't be, we're giving you a $10,000 credit towards buyer's agent's commission. It has to be to their overall concessions, which would be escrow and title. And it can include, and it says right here, buyer broker compensation, but it can't be directly towards that. At the end of the day, if their total closing costs are $20,000 and that includes their agent's commission and they're getting the credit of 10, now they only owe an additional $10,000. So the seller can't state that they're giving a credit just for the buyer's agent's commission. In that case, they would wait until the buyer wrote an offer on 3G3 and they would offer to pay for the commission there. Security insurance showing audio and video. It is really important that you have that kind of conversation with your client. Anything of any value, take it and put it away. If they have a jewelry box, put it at a family member's house. If they are a Second Amendment house and they have lots of guns, put it at a grandparent's house. Move things. I've been at open houses where a client will leave a $20 bill out and a thing of AirPods. I'll take it, text them and say, I put it in your third drawer underneath the blue t-shirt. Make sure they don't leave anything out. Knock on wood. I have never had anything taken from the house, but you don't want to tempt fate. You don't want them to leave anything out. Also here with showings, audios, and videos, it is telling them right here, is not demanding, but it is highly recommending that they make people aware. People may not be aware of recorded audio or visual devices such as nanny cams. Seller is advised to post a notice disclosing that. Put a picture by the, or a little thing by the ring door camera that says smile, you're on camera. If you have a nanny cam in the house, have them put something that says smile, you're on camera. It actually will help out because so many times you get that buyer who's sitting in the front yard and they're, oh my God, that back bedroom, it smelled so bad and it was a hideous blue and I'm gonna have to repaint it. And then all of a sudden they wrote the most amazing offer and it's $10,000 above asking. And your seller doesn't want to take it. Why? Because they just heard that buyer trashing the house on the ring camera. You would hope that most buyers agents would have common sense to have their client walk all the way out into the street or walk over to their car before they start bashing the house. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't do that. So you want to protect your client. You want to protect them from clients saying things about the house that maybe they don't need to know, and then writing a high offer and not wanting to take that high offer. So highly recommend to them that if there are cameras, that they put a little piece of paper right by the camera, even if it's a Ring doorbell that says smile, you're on camera. Photographs and internet advertising, it does state right here that we will do the best we can to tell them not to post it on the internet. However, we can't control them. Unfortunately, we can ask them, but they cannot hold the agents harmless if the seller goes and takes such pictures. Key and lockbox, obviously the only one who has access to it is a licensed real estate agent. Just to let you know, and I don't have it in front of me, I think it is $750. If you called an agent asking for permission to get to the property, and they didn't answer you, and you went ahead and showed it anyways. Say it says appointment only, but you could see in the pictures that it's vacant, and you went and disregarded what the showing instructions are. I believe it's a $750 fine. If not, it is a little bit higher. But you can get fined by not abiding by the showing instructions. So as an agent, you want to be able to tell your client, I'm putting a lockbox on here, but if I put appointment only, the only one who's going to come to the property are the people who make an appointment. If they access it without it, MLS rule says that they're guilty and we can go ahead and give them a fine or try to fine them. If the property is tenant occupied, you need their permission to access the property. The form would be the KLA. What happens if the tenant says, no, too bad, I'm not allowing you access to the property? Well, then unfortunately your hands are tied. You cannot just automatically go to the property because the seller wants you to. The seller needs to work something out with the tenant, maybe give them a month free of rent, maybe cut their rent in half. That way they can make it accessible. Maybe only Tuesdays and Wednesdays from 4 to 8 it's accessible, whatever it may be. The seller needs to work something out with the tenant. If the tenant does not agree to allow you in the property, you cannot access it just because the seller wants you to. The next ones are self-explanatory. The one thing, management approval. So most offices have a standard and minimum. Usually it's no less than 2%. If you're going to take anything less than 2%, you need management approval. Some offices have a policy where you could do one transaction a year for free if it's your primary residence. All of that is great, but you need management approval. You need to be able to talk to management and say, I'm going to take a listing for less than the standard average, maybe because it's my own house or maybe because it's my grandma's house, whatever it may be, but get management approval if you're taking anything less than the standard average. Mediation, everyone agrees on all contracts to mediate before they arbitrate. There are some exceptions to mediation, small claims court, deed in lieu of foreclosure, bankruptcy, mechanics lien, stuff like that. Arbitration. If seller and buyer desire to resolve their disputes between this on arbitration, then you would go ahead and do the ARB form. The purchase contract automatically has arbitration in there. This does not. So what that means is you have to try to mediate it. If it doesn't get resolved through mediation, when you go to litigation, it's up to you. You both can mutually agree to arbitration or mutually agree to other forms of litigation. The other forms of litigation is you're going to be judged by a jury of your peers, or you're going to be judged by an attorney who knows real estate law. Me personally, if I'm going to have a dispute with a seller, I want to be judged by an attorney or a judge or a justice who understands. So I want arbitration to be a part of this. So if that is the case on all of my listing agreements, I'm probably going to include the ARB form because I want him or her to decide that any disputes are going to be resolved through arbitration. And I don't want to have to wait till last minute and make sure that they don't agree to it. So this is something you may want to include on all your listing agreements. The agreement is in its entirety. You can't have a part listing agreement. It has to be completed. The person who is signing this says that they are the legal owners. If for some reason the seller who is selling it is an entity, meaning a trust, an LLC, a corporation, within 3 days of them signing this, they have to show you proof they're the legal signers for the entity. So if it is an LLC, they need to show you articles of incorporation. If it's a trust, they need to show you trust documents showing that they are the legal signers. This is now on all documents. the BRBC, the purchase contract, you no longer have to do the RCSD form, which stands for Representation Capacity Signature Disclosure Form. You can, but they have it built into all the contracts. So if your seller does happen to be an entity, you would mark this box. You would state the full name of the entity, and you're thinking, well, I already put the seller as a Dueñas Trust. Yeah, but sometimes the trust has a more lengthy name. The Dueñas Trust and something, something, something established and something, something, something. There's a more lengthy name. Here's where you'd put it. Here is where you'd put the two legal signers or one legal signer, if there is, of the trust. And then if they have a title. So in my imaginary case right here, there's a power of attorney. If there wasn't power of attorney and I was just a trust, I would put I was a trustee or I was a successor trustee, whatever the title may be. If you are listing this with more than 2 agents, then you would do the AAA form. I think it's really funny right here. It says more than 1 agent. No, there's spot right here for 2 separate agents. So if there's a team of 2 agents, you don't need that AAA form. It has more than enough spots right here for both of you to sign. If there is a 3rd agent, then you would do the AAA form. If you want to list this with another company, Southern B, Prudential, whatever it may be, it's a totally different brokerage. You can absolutely do so, and you would do the ABA form. Code of Ethic article number 11 is working outside your scope of expertise. So if you have a house listed in Sacramento and you're not able to get up there and do your AVID, you may want to think of co-listing it with another brokerage. Therefore, you would do the ABA form. While the AVID, agent visual inspection, is not a statutory disclosure, you are required as a listing agent under California Civil Code 2045 to do a visual inspection of every single property you list. That's not a virtual visual inspection. It's I stepped into the property and did a visual inspection. If you are unable to do so, then you probably need to co-list it with someone who is able to do so. Okay, the multiple listing services. All the stuff that was in the listing agreement that talked about the MLS is now on this own form. This breaks down what is a multiple listing service, what information is provided in there, what is a listing broker, and then exposures and the impact of impacting or opting out of it. One of the things, if you could see my little cursor right here under 2BI, seller authorizes limited exposure to the property and no marketing and advertising of any kind to the public. So the most common way that people get caught for clear cooperation policy is I take a listing and it's going to start on Friday. Today is Monday. And I go ahead and call the sign company and say, hey, can you put that sign up on Friday? I'm getting a new listing. It's going to hit the market on Friday. Sure, no problem. And the sign company happens to be available and they go ahead and they go out there on Tuesday. And man, that neighbor is mad. That neighbor feels like she should have got the listing. She's been a realtor. She's known them for years and she's mad that you got it. She takes a picture of your for sale sign and she reports it to the MLS. And the MLS sits there and waits. And it's Tuesday. And now by end of day on Wednesday, it's not in the MLS. You get hit with a clear cooperation policy. It is $2,500 fine. There is no excuse. You can't say, well, I didn't know my sign company was going to come up. What you should have done is maybe had the sign company go out there and just put the post and your actual for sale sign. Maybe they should put it on the side of the house where no one can see it. Or maybe you should keep a copy of it. And then when Friday comes, you can hang it up on the post. But a sign in the front yard constitutes as public marketing. Okay. What happens if I say, oh, I'm getting a new listing, any buyers in the something, something community hit me up. I don't put the property address. I don't put the sales price, but I'm talking about a particular property. I'm saying anyone interested in a 3-bedroom home in a certain community that has a pool, let me know. That it constitutes as marketing. I'm marketing a house, whether it has a property address or not. I'm giving you information about a particular house that is not in the MLS. If someone turns in my Instagram post or my MLS post, it is a $2,500 fine. No exceptions, no ifs, ands, or buts. They will hit me with a $2,500 fine. Reduce of exposure by not putting in the MLS. Obviously, you're not going to get as much exposure. So when a client talks about off-market property, oh, I want to do off-market, that's fine. But they have to know that off-market property, if it's not in the MLS, it can't be anywhere else. Can't have a sign, can't be on Instagram. It cannot be on a company website. It cannot be anywhere else. You cannot market it if it is not in the MLS as active or coming soon. Has to be one of those two ways in order for you to market it. Then it goes into here to clear cooperation policy. So we talked about MLS rule 7.8. You have 2 days to notify the MLS that you have effective listing. Well, everywhere you hear me say 2 days, 2 days. However, the exception to it is once you start marketing it, it now goes down, and you'll see right here, 3A, 1 business day. So if I go ahead and I put a for sale sign in the front yard, guess what? It better be in the MLS within a day. If I go ahead and put it on Facebook, it better be in the MLS within 1 day. The 2 rules no longer apply the second I start to market it. The 2 days automatically become 1 day. And again, it repeats itself multiple times on here. Public marketing is including, but not limited to, window signs, yard signs, digital marketing, public facing websites, broker websites, digital communication, email blasts. If I were to send an email blast out to all my clients, any multiple broker listing sharing network, if I go to a broker preview and I talk about that, that is considered public marketing. Any type of public marketing has to be in MLS within 1 day. If someone turns you in, you're violating clear cooperation policy. You have right here coming soon. Coming soon is the absolute opposite. I can market it. I can tell everybody I want out there. I just can't show it. In the MLS, you could do coming soon for up to 21 days. Once you pass 21 days and it's not ready to go active, then you could do a whole do not show. Now you need a modification of terms to do that, because anytime you change the status without a modification of terms is a $250 fine. So you would need a whole do not, or a modification of terms for that. What if I did my coming soon for 14 days and they suddenly said that they wanted to do it for longer? Can I extend it? Absolutely. You can extend it out to 21 days. Now, not all MLSs have a coming soon form signed that they require, but CRMLS does. If you go under forms and you go under all, this is the form. It is called Seller Instructs to Place Listing into CRMLS Coming Soon Status. This is reminding the seller that you can't show it during this time. It's in coming soon status. So if someone calls on that sign or knocks on your door and says, can I see it? Their response needs to be, I'm sorry, it's in coming soon status. Please contact my agent. They can't do a trust sale. They can't do an estate sale. They cannot do a garage sale. They cannot open it up, even if it's just the front yard. Oh, when we do our garage sale, it doesn't matter. You cannot let the public put a step onto the property or put a foot onto the property unless it's an active status. And coming soon status is not open to the public. You cannot make any exceptions. If someone wants to write an offer, can they? Absolutely. They can write an offer subject to interior inspection. And then once you accept that offer, then you can allow them into the property. But no one is allowed unless the offer is accepted or it is in active status. So that is coming soon. You don't need to mark anything on here. If they do want to do coming soon, you would just need to do the CRMLS form coming soon. Seller instructs broker to either it automatically goes into the MLS, meaning that we're going active or coming soon, or you're instructing me to exclude it. That SCL form, seller excludes listing for multiple listing service, is no longer there. You would mark this box And you would either say that we're keeping off the market for this time period or the whole transaction. This can be changed at any given time. If they wanted to say that this was going to be off the market until, I don't know, March 1st, and all of a sudden they decided they wanted to extend that out to March 15th, can they? Absolutely. We do a modification of terms. If they all of a sudden wanted to bring it active, can they? Yes, you do a modification of terms. If they said they didn't want on MLS for its whole transaction, can we change it? Yes. What would be one of the reasons why you would change it? What would be one of the reasons why you would exclude the listing from the MLS? Well, one, what if they already had their own buyer and they didn't want to put in the MLS, they didn't want anyone to know, they just wanted you to take the listing and buyer? Great. And we're going to go ahead and exclude it from the MLS. Well, when agents look me up, I want them to be able to see I closed 15 transactions last year. So I may ask the seller, hey, seller, we're about 7 days out from closing. Can we go ahead and put this in the MLS? That way I can at least show credit that I sold the house. And assuming they say yes, we would do the modification of terms. I would then input the listing into the MLS. I wouldn't need a whole bunch of information. I could do a brief description. I just need one exterior picture, and then I would put it in as active and immediately go pending because we already have an offer for this. But if you wanted credit for yourself, that is one of the things. One of the things that I also forgot to talk about is post dating. Can we post date a listing? If for some reason the house needs a lot of work and it needs stuff done to it and we need a full 10 days, can I have this listing start March 3rd? Absolutely. There's no reason why you cannot post date it. And maybe they signed it today. So the effective date is March 3rd. So I'd have 2 days from March 3rd to put it in the MLS. So what is the downfall with post dating it opposed to the SELM? Well, I better have control over my seller. If my seller wanted to go ahead and list it with someone else between now and then, could they? Yes, but that person would not only have to be able to list it, but they would have to be able to close it before my listing starts because the seller went ahead and signed it today. So technically, I have a stronger hold on them. But if they were to find someone else to list it with them and that person is able to close it before March 3rd, then they have the right to do so. If this is a seller I know that's not going to cheat on me, I've known them forever, they're not going to go anywhere, then I may post date it. So I don't have to deal with that, excluding it from the MLS. I don't have to register it then to go ahead and put it active. I just go ahead and put it active on March 3rd. What are some reasons why you would do this? Well, maybe they need to paint the house. Maybe you need to stage the house. Maybe you need a photographer in there. There's many reasons why the listing doesn't start when it should. But if you don't know this client and you just met them in an open house and you're kind of unsure about them, then in that case, you'll have the listing start today. And then on this multiple listing service, maybe we'll go ahead and have March 1st as the date that it goes active. And in that case, you still have to register it because remember, we have to notify the MLS within 2 days. And then once March 1st comes, I would go ahead and put it active in the MLS. Like I stated before, this is not an option. You cannot hit clear cooperation policy doesn't apply because your board of realtors that you are with adapted it and it does apply. Any questions at all on clear cooperation policy? All right. Item number 4 does not apply to you. There is a form called SELI, and it means that the seller is opting to exclude out of certain features of the MLS, meaning that I don't want my address in the MLS. You can market the house, but you cannot market my address. While that is great and dandy and that form works perfectly fine, CRMLS does not allow it. They say, unfortunately, if you're going to list in the MLS, you have to go ahead and put the property address. Even if their seller signed the form saying that they want to do an SELI, they don't allow it. So you could go ahead and fill it out all day long, but when you go ahead and turn it into the CRMLS, they're going to tell you, so sorry, we can't honor it. Same thing right here, seller elects to opt out of certain features. You can mark this box all day long, but CRMLS has the overall say so. And unfortunately, they do not honor that. This is the same paragraph that is in the listing agreement. It's just a little bit shorter and more to the fact. It says sellers can instruct the broker to publish information in the MLS saying that the persons preparing the appraisal inspection are the only ones who could take pictures, and seller acknowledges the unauthorized persons may take images who do not have access to this or maybe have not read it. So we can say, and there's a box right here, seller instructs broker to publish in the MLS that taking images is limited to those preparing an appraisal and inspection. So any buyers who come in are not allowed to take pictures. However, we can't guarantee that they're not gonna not take pictures. So this is where they would just ask us. The other thing that I would like to point out, and unfortunately it is not on here, but it is on the RPA. I believe it is RPA item number 23. Nope, 21. 21 says multiple listing services that, according to California Civil Code 1088, that any pictures in the listing agreement cannot be taken out after closing. So many times you will get a buyer after the close of escrow and they'll say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm a police officer, or I'm a, politician or someone, and I don't want the pictures of the inside of the house on the MLS where other people can access it. Can you please go ahead and delete them? Unfortunately, you can't. The purchase contract states it on item number 21. And removing pictures after the close of escrow is a violation of California Civil Code, like I said, 1088. Okay, this last one is short and sweet, just talks about broker compensation advisory, talks about all the different ways that we get paid. We can get paid as a dual agency. The buyer's agent can either pay for the buyer's agent, or they can ask the seller to pay for the buyer's agent. It breaks down all the different ways that the seller would pay compensation. They can either pay it to just their agent, or they can pay it to their agent and the buyer's agent. The PRBS, someone at one point sued and said, I thought you were my only agent. And this says that we work with multiple buyers and multiple sellers. So there could be a chance that I'm writing an offer for 2 different buyers on the same house. Remember, this contract is with Nest, not you as an individual. So I may be writing an offer, and Seth may be writing an offer, and Michael may be writing an offer. And in that case, there's 3 different contracts with Nest writing an offer. So this just explains that we represent more than one buyer and more than one seller. Fair housing. Be very, very careful as a listing agent not to discriminate. There's 22 protected classes. The most common are race, color, sex, creed, or national origin. The number one that usually sues is disability. So the main thing as a listing agent, where listing agents are getting in trouble, is what you are putting in your public remarks. The property is walking distance to Disneyland. Not everyone can walk. That is a discriminatory thing to say. Step on into this beautiful house. Well, not everyone can step. Not everyone can walk. Be careful of what you put in your public description. And I know it sounds silly because we're nitpicking certain things, but there has been, not only is an MLS violation, but there has been discrimination lawsuits about it. So you want to do the best you can to protect your seller from any fair housing issues. If your seller or buyer feel like they were discriminated against for any of those reasons, they can write to or go onto these websites for the federal, state, local, DRE, and any other levels. They can look up this website. Seller advisory. I think it is, and hopefully the next class that we're going to do is the TDS and the SPQ. Is very, very, very important as a listing agent that you understand the disclosures in its entirety. One of the things that I want to bring up real quick before we end this class is on the TDS where you sign it. One of the things that says for the listing agent is it's based on the agent's visual inspection and I'm not going to say the right words. I want to make sure I actually say it correctly. So bear with me 2 seconds. Page 287. The to understand based on the above inquiry of the seller as to the condition of the property. So you're thinking, well, no big deal, and no one even pays attention to that line. No, it is a big deal. If you notice on the SPQ, they state that there's no dogs in the property, but last time you went there, you saw a litter box, then you didn't inquire as to the condition of the property. You are guilty for not understanding the contract enough to explain it to them. You as an agent are not allowed to fill out the seller disclosure for them, but you are to advise them. Item number 5 on the SPQ, I can go over and over with it, and agents still make the mistake on it. Item number 5 says they are supposed to disclose any reports, estimates, documents, whether written, oral, whether past, present, anything to the given buyer. The biggest story I ever have is the seller wasn't sure he wanted to sell. He called a roofing company, told the roofer, come out and take a look at my roof. And he said, oh, there's nothing wrong with it. It's going to cost you $13,000 if you want a new roof. Damn, okay. A few weeks later, he listed it, sold it, buyer moved in, buyer decided they want a new roof. They called a few roofing companies, called this one. They said, oh, we went out there maybe 4 months ago and we gave them a quote. Well, was there anything wrong with the house? No. Did they act upon it? No, but we told them it was $13,000. Guess who paid for that new roof? The seller, because SPQ item number 5 says an estimate, says whether they act upon it or not, whether written or oral, whether past or present. If you don't fully understand item number 5 enough to inquire and be able to explain it to them, then you are guilty every single time you sign your spot on the TDS. So please, please, please make sure you understand that. Same thing with the seller advisory. This is probably one of the most important documents that you need to tell them. They need to disclose everything on the TDS, disclose if there's any deaths, disclose anything on the SPQ, so on and so forth. This unfortunately does not get signed by the listing agent. I wish it would, because it's reiterating to them all the things that they need to disclose. Last one is the privacy notice. We can't take their social and put it up on a billboard. However, we do have to keep everything private to the most part. If it is a deed, a grant deed, a deed of trust, that is public record. Sometimes sellers don't want anyone to know that their neighbor bought it. Well, then the neighbor needs to buy it under a fictitious name, because anything that is a grant deed is public record. We went over that. Oh, I lied. I know I said one more, but this is your, I already went over the MLSA. Modification of terms. If you want to change anything at any given time on the listing agreement, here's where you would do so. If you were changing the price, you would do it here. If you're changing out the expiration, you would do it here. If you're changing out the compensation, you would do it here. If you were changing whether or not we are putting on a hold do not show, whether or not we are now putting it active, whether or not we're bringing in the dates of the coming soon, you would put it all here in the body. And then last but not least, the cancellation of agreement. They do not have to force you into canceling this. Now, if I think someone's going to tarnish my name and reputation, probably I'm going to cancel this agreement. But the cancellation agreement has to be mutually agreed upon. They are in a legal binding contract. You can hold them to this listing agreement. If you so wanted to let them cancel, you can say they owe you X%. They owe you X% if they sell it or convey it anytime between now and when it's supposed to expire. Or maybe the principal owes you no compensation. You're just going to go ahead and let them out of it. Whatever you want to do is up to you, but it needs to be mutually agreed upon between you and the seller. Okay, so I talked really, really fast at the end because I wanted to get through all of that. Any questions on anything we went over? Everyone understands it 100%? Okay,
I have
so
a question.
yes.
It goes back to the listing agreement. I believe it's section D, letter F.
Okay.
You had said something about you must present all offers within a reasonable amount of time. I believe that's that area of the.
Yes.
Okay. And let's say, like you said, they get into escrow and they say, oh no, we don't want any other offers presented to us once we're in escrow. And I know the conversation was per the seller's instructions.
Yes.
Do you have to get that in writing though, so that you have their signature somewhere stating that they gave you those instructions not to do that?
It doesn't need to be something that they sign. A text message and an email would constitute as in writing, because otherwise it's, I didn't tell you to say that. And so
Right.
then you play that he said, she said game. And so it's easy just to say, hey, we're now in escrow. Do you want me to give you any offers? The MLS rule does state in there, when it comes to presenting offers, if they say that you're not willing to present any offers per the seller's instructions, they have a right to ask you for a copy of the seller stating that. So yes, I would say it does need to be in writing. It doesn't need to be signed, but
Right.
an email or a text message would constitute as in writing.
Also, it like they don't want to review offers that don't have proof of funds, things of that nature. Same concept. Get it in writing.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
you can
okay.
even, I mean, so many times we get offers that are horribly written and they just, I mean, you can have conversations with your client. If it's not a complete offer, if it doesn't have proof of funds, as long as the seller says, yes, I don't want to see offers like that, then your response is per the seller's instructions. You can't take it upon yourself to say, oh, well, this has proof of, doesn't have proof of funds and it's horribly written, or it's, 500,000 under, and I know my seller won't accept it. Unless they tell you, no, don't give them to me, you have to keep sending them.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, so our next class, I think we're going to do this I think it was the last week, or the last Monday of every week and the second Monday of every week. So it's the second and last Monday of every single week. So the next one would be on March 10th, same time, 12 o'clock. It'll probably be on the TDS and the SPQ. I usually break that up into 2 classes because it's just really intense and it will probably scare a lot of people away. I hope it doesn't, but it will go over everything. And then we'll also, a week or so after that, we'll go over MLS rules and regulations and all of that stuff. So put on your calendar March 10th, and then it should be the first or the second and the last Monday of every month. Sometimes there'll be 2 weeks in between because sometimes there's 5 weeks in a month, but it's going to be the second and the last Monday of every month. And then if you guys have any questions on anything contract related, call me anytime. You guys have my cell phone number. If not, it's 562-587-0559. Again, that's 562-587-0559. You can call my cell phone anytime, text me, call me, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you may have. All right, any other questions? Going once, twice? All right, I'll see you guys later. Bye.